already know that I'm currently lucky to own 3 Nissan GTRs. But like most people, I wasn't born with the silver spoon in my mouth and swathed in mulberry silk diapers, doused in Chanel No. 5. Teenage me may have dreamed of Nissan GTRs and hot girls, and picking up hot girls in my Nissan GTR. But my first car was a far more humble Nissan Sentra. And I didn't get the hot girls either. Now, I don't blame the Sentra though. That was probably down to me, because girls were swiping left on me way before Tinder had even been invented. So the Sentra holds a special place in my heart. And today, in this video, I'm going to talk about why I think Nissan needs to build a properly sporty Sentra once again. So, catch me after the intro. Hello again. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And of course, thanks to previous viewers and subscribers for coming back. I'm Oliver, and I'm a car geek. Actually, just plain geek in general. And I'm a total Nissan and import car fan. Nissan's flagship performance model, the GTR, is my absolute favorite vehicle, and I'm fortunate to own 3. An R35, a Midnight Purple R34, and a Nismo R32. They're why I started my blog, 23gt.net, and eventually this channel. Here and on the blog, I talk all about Nissan related stuff and occasionally my other hobbies, while trying to keep it lighthearted and funny, so I hope you'll enjoy this video and decide to give it a like, comment, or even subscribe. Now, on to the main video. The Sentra, also known as the Sunny, Sylphy, and Pulsar outside America, has been Nissan's entry-level car in many markets for a very long time now, so it shouldn't surprise you that it's also the company's best-selling model of all time, not just here in the US, but globally. Although crossovers like the Rogue and Qashqai have now taken over as the volume leaders in recent years, the Sentra still sells hundreds of thousands of units every year. Entry level usually means certain things in cars. Practical, cheap, fuel efficient, boring. The type of car that gets picked last at the rental counter, and not just because it has a vague but unmistakably lingering scent of vomit still in it. Although entry level cars have gotten a lot better these days, they're still not exactly what you'd call exciting. There was a time though when Nissan bestowed upon the world a cheap car that would pass into legend. No, not because it sucked like a Yugo or a Ford Pinto, but because it was the total opposite of suckage. It was awesome. That car was the original Sentra SER, and that brings me to reason number 1 why Nissan needs to build a new one. The Sentra SER has a great legacy. The original SER was sold from 1991 to 1994 and was based on the 3rd generation or B18 Sentra. But instead of having just 110 horsepower like the normal cars, the SER had 140 from a high-revving, non-turbocharged version of the SR20 Inline 4 that 240SX and Sylvia fans go crazy about nowadays. 140 may not sound like much, but at the time, most sporty coupes made barely more than that. The 240SX, for example, made only 155. And this was in a car that weighed only about 2,400 pounds, and handled so well that many car magazines called it a modern successor to the BMW 2002, the car that gave birth to the legendary 3 Series. The SER also only came with a 5-speed manual, and it had a viscous, limited slip differential as standard. An LSD was unheard of in a cheap car back in those days, so you could see how serious Nissan was about making the SER a properly fun ride despite its value price of $11,000. That was in a time when the average car cost around $15,000 bucks. Yeah, The looks of the original SER were more on the sleeper end, but it was such good value and such a fun car to drive that it found a coveted spot in Car and Driver's 10 best list. Other publications gushed over the original SER just as much. Subsequent generations of the Sentra would keep the SER name going, but to varying degrees of success. The succeeding B14 generation was basically a reskin with a bit sleeker styling, but the exact same drivetrain and a less sporty torsion beam rear suspension instead of the original's independent system. Decent, but nothing too exciting. The B15 generation was more of a highlight when it introduced the SER Spec V. The Sentra lost the two-door coupe version, but the Spec V made up for it by having 175 horsepower from a 2.5-liter NA 4-banger versus the regular car's 126. A 6-speed manual, helical LSD, and a Skyline-inspired restyle of the front end meant the 2002 Spec V was a great entry-level sports sedan. I had one myself when I first came to the US, and I miss it, even if the torque steer nearly put me in a ditch more than once. Nissan would kind of water down the SER after 2003, doing away with the Skyline-style front end in favor of a generic-looking one that made SERs look like just regular Sentras with a tacked-on wing in the back. The watering down would continue with the B16 introduced in 2006, which was awkward looking on the outside, cheap on the inside, and no faster than the B15. The B17 of 2012 wasn't all that much better. The styling traded odd for bland, and the interior was just as cheap and plasticky. Initially, they didn't even offer an SER version, but eventually after the model was already 5 years old and due for a replacement in 2017, they decided to come out with a Nismo trim level, which really didn't live up to the tuning division's legendary reputation. The Nismo had the same 188 horsepower as the lower-end SR model, and instead just hung its hat on its sport-tuned suspension. I'm sorry, Nissan, but tweaking spring rates and using stiffer roll bars is never going to be as sexy as simply saying, more power, no matter how much cheap red trim you decide to throw on the car. You want to know what makes the 2017 release of the Nismo Sentra even more sad? Back in 2013, Nissan debuted a Nismo Sentra concept with a very healthy 240 horsepower. 4 years of waiting to get a sad, watered-down version of a production-ready concept car. The only thing worse than that to come out after a 4-year wait was the 1936 Berlin Olympics. And the only reason the Nismo Sentra doesn't come out on top is because it wasn't organized by Adolf Hitler. So on that underwhelming note, we get to reason number 2 for why Nissan needs to build a new SER. Nissan needs to rebuild its performance credibility. Nissan has made a lot of great sporty cars over the years, including the GTR, the Z, the Silvia, the Pulsar GTIR, and so on. Right now though, Nissan just has the GTR and the Z as the only truly performance-oriented cars in its lineup, and both of them are long overdue for replacements. Adding a new Sentra SER would be a nice addition, and it would really help cement that Nissan hasn't forgotten its performance car roots. Plus, it would kill two birds with one stone, because that brings me to reason number 3. Nissan needs an entry-level performance car. The R35 GTR is an amazing car, but you'd consider it cheap only if your idea of a beater is a brand new Ferrari Roma. The Z is much more attainable, but it's still a stretch if you're young and new to the workforce, especially when you factor in the higher insurance costs of being a 2-door, 2-seater sports car. Neither of them are really entry-level, but the SER has been the very definition of that since the first generation. Being based on the humble 4-door Sentra means lower retail price, lower insurance premiums, more practicality, while still being a hoot to drive if done right. A new SER would be a great gateway drug for budding young Nissan fans, and would also appeal to older enthusiasts with perhaps a bit more money, but maybe wanting something a little less hardcore and more inexpensive for a daily driver. So those are 3 great reasons so far why Nissan needs to build a new SER. The next two are probably the best reasons though. Reason number 4 is a biggie. Nissan already has all the ingredients for a great new Sentra SER. The most important component, of course, to such a new model would be having a good normal Sentra to base it off of, and this current B18 generation is a peach. In almost all ways, it's a big improvement over the model it replaced. The styling is much better. It's got a lower roofline and a wider track that gives it a more hunkered down, sportier look. It's styled like a Mini Maxima, but minus the large schnoz that its bigger brother has, so overall it actually looks better in my opinion. The current Sentra not only looks like it'll hug the road better, it actually does, thanks to better suspension tuning and a new independent rear suspension replacing the old torsion beam of the previous generations. The interior is also significantly better. The nicer materials and overall much improved design make the new Sentra more resort suite in the Virgin Islands compared to the old car's solitary cell on Rikers Island. This car is such an improvement, it just begs to get a sportier version worthy of the SER badge. Okay, the regular Sentra has an engine that's kind of anemic and it still has a CVT, but that's all the more reason throwing in a stouter motor and a manual transmission would make it so much better. And Nissan has a motor already that would work, the MR Turbo 4-cylinder. The US B18 already has a version of the MR as its single engine choice, but it's a naturally aspirated 2-liter and only puts out 149 horsepower. The turbo 1.6-liter MR that the old B17 Sentra SR had spit out nearly 40 more ponies than that, while the version in the Nismo Juke RS had 215. What would really be cool though would be if Nissan used the 1.8-liter Turbo MR that their sister company Renault uses in the Megane RS and Alpine A110, since that's tuned for either 276 or a properly swole 296 horsepower. Having a high output motor is just one key upgrade though. To get the most out of it, you'll need a good transmission. Here again, Nissan already has what it needs. In Canada, the B18 Sentra can be had with a 6-speed manual, an option that the drive.com says makes the car much more fun to drive, and I'm sure all you fellow driving enthusiasts out there would agree with that sentiment. For an SER, a manual would have to be offered, but Nissan could also opt to expand the car's appeal by having an automated transmission option. Once again, the Renault parts bin can help, since the Megane RS has a 7-speed dual clutch box that's meant to go with that 1.8-liter MR turbo. So you see, Nissan already has everything it needs to make a very fun to drive brand new Sentra SR, and some good reasons to do so. Here's one final big reason. Other manufacturers are already offering cheap performance cars. Honda has had the sweet Civic Si for decades, but they finally took pity on American enthusiasts by bringing over the full boy racer Type R in 2017. The other member of the Japanese Big Three, Toyota, introduced the FRS in 2013, with Subaru offering a twin in the BRZ. The second generation of both just got introduced, and Toyota seems committed to adding more affordable sporty cars, with the maniacal GR Yaris being sold in Europe and rumors of a hot-rodded Corolla based on it coming to America. Korean company Hyundai has been on a hot streak lately and making serious inroads into the Japanese brands' market share. One of the ways they're upgrading their reputation from simply being a cheaper alternative to the Japanese and Americans is by offering thrilling but inexpensive performance models. The same strategy the Japanese used in the 80s and 90s to boost their rep. Hyundai's N lineup has been getting the brand some serious attention, with the Veloster N being considered a serious match to the Civic Type R, and the Elantra N line going up against the SI. This just shows that even as car makers shift towards electrics and crossovers, there's still plenty of enthusiasm for performance cars, both on the cheaper end and the more expensive end of the spectrum. With Nissan needing to do some serious rebuilding of its cred, then what better time than now to revive the iconic Sentra SER? How awesome would it be to have a B18 Sentra like this, but with more aggressive bodywork and a 300 horsepower turbo motor under the hood? Is it going to happen? Probably not. What with the restructuring Nissan's having to do with its lineup. But wouldn't it be a welcome surprise if it did? If you agree, let me know in the comments below, and until next time, drive safe, everybody. If you watch the channel, you probably haven't seen me get bumped around by ice cream too, because the cane blocks are stiff as hell. But we won't talk about that right now. And handled so well that many car magazines called it a modern successor to the BMW 2002. The car that gave birth to the legendary 3 Series. And really redo that. Because I burped. Yes, I burped in the middle of the take. So dumb. Here and on the blog, I talk all about Nissan related stuff and occasionally my other hobbies, while trying to keep it light. God almighty, I did it the first time. And eventually, this channel. Where there's action, there's always a chance. Oh, hello, hummingbird. Hello, little hummingbird. Stupid me, it wasn't even recording. Christ.